She didn't start a fight. All she wanted was peace, a quiet home, and a place to heal. But when the HOA called her dogs weapons and threatened to take them, she didn't back down. She didn't need to, because what none of them knew, those dogs were trained for war, and they remembered everything. What happened next wasn't in any HOA manual, because it ends with a warning they'll never forget. She was the kind of woman most people overlooked until they didn't. Jeans, soft flannel, boots always muddy from the garden. She spoke with the kind of calm you couldn't fake, like somebody who'd already lived through the worst and had nothing left to prove. Around here, they called her that woman with the dogs. No one really knew her name, but they noticed her yard, neat, fenced quiet. Elaine had moved in 7 months ago, at the far end of the cul-de-sac, where the houses thinned out and the trees grew thick. She kept to herself, never caused a stir. No parties, no trash, just her and her 3 dogs, Brutus, Echo, and Delta. They didn't bark at cars. They didn't jump fences. They didn't chase joggers. Most days, they didn't even make a sound. That was the first clue. Silence. Each dog had scars you couldn't see unless you knew where to look. Brutus limped in the mornings. Echo never took her eyes off the horizon. Delta liked to lay with her back to walls, always watching doors. They weren't guard dogs. They were ghosts of past missions, trained to move on command, protect without question, and finish whatever they started. None of that showed in their wagging tails or quiet obedience. But Elaine knew it was in them, and she knew what it meant to live with beings who understood war. She didn't move to this neighborhood to make friends. She moved because the land was clean, the air was still, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to sleep with one eye open. The house wasn't fancy, just steady. Like her, and day by day, she started to believe this could be permanent. But peace rarely stays that way for long. The first letter came tucked inside a clear plastic sleeve, posted at her gate like a trophy. No greeting, no signature, just a warning in bold print. Violation. Unregistered pets are concerning breed and behavioral profile. Failure to comply may result in formal enforcement action. Elaine read it twice. Then she looked up at Brutus, laying in the shade, asleep with his face in a patch of clover. She didn't laugh, but she wanted to. She tucked the letter away without reacting. Maybe it was a formality. Maybe a neighbor got confused. After all, her dogs didn't bark at 3 a.m., didn't lunge at fences. They didn't do anything worth complaining about. These dogs didn't know chaos. They knew commands. But 3 days later, a second notice arrived, this one thicker, with a stapled photo, Delta standing by the front gate, looking out. The angle was wrong. It was taken through the slats. Someone had to be on the property to get it. This time, the letter was colder, official, second and final warning. Tactical-appearing animals may pose a threat to neighborhood safety. Ongoing noncompliance will trigger citation and intervention. That word, tactical, like the dogs were weapons. Not living, breathing creatures. Not retired service K9s who'd followed every order dropped into dust storm danger 10,000 miles from here. Elaine still didn't respond. Until the day a knock came. He called himself compliance officer, though there was no badge, no uniform. Just a polo shirt with a stitched HOA logo and a clipboard like a weapon. "We've had complaints," he said. "Multiple neighbors uncomfortable with your animals." Elaine folded her arms. "Which neighbors?" He didn't answer, just wrote something on his form. "Let me be clear," he said. "If those dogs bite someone, the liability is yours. The HOA will not protect non-compliant residents." She didn't flinch. "They won't bite someone unless I tell them to." He left without a word. But before he reached the sidewalk, Echo appeared silently at the fence line, watching him go. Elaine watched too, and for the first time, she felt it. This neighborhood wasn't just uncomfortable with her dogs. It was preparing for something. She woke up to silence, but the dogs were already awake, and they weren't looking at the door. They were looking at the sky. Elaine knew peace had an expiration date. She just hoped this one would last a little longer. It started 2:47 a.m., a faint hum above the barn. No wind, no birds, just a sound that didn't belong. Echo, normally curled beside the front door, was standing now, still and locked in position, eyes skyward. Delta stalked silently beneath the porch. Brutus was already outside, staring up into the darkness. Then she saw it. A black drone, no lights, barely visible. It hovered, dipping left, shifting right, as if it was scanning. Elaine moved fast. She reached for the external security feed and scrubbed through the last hour. There was 20 minutes of low, sweep patterns, moving in grid-like passes over home. No insignia, no visible camera, but she knew better. Thermal, she mumbled to herself, and probably audio. This wasn't a neighbor's toy. It was a professional-grade surveillance unit, mapped for search and data pull. But who was flying it, and why target her? By morning, 2 more things had changed. First, the goats were missing from their pen. Not gone, but huddled together behind the garden shed, wide-eyed and trembling. The latch had been undone. Not broken. Not clawed. Opened. Second, her eastern fence line had fresh boot prints. Not deep, but distinct. A smooth heel-to-toe tread. A man's gait. Military standard. Elaine knelt beside them and traced one finger along the imprint. Size 11, she murmured. Nothing about this was random. Then came the final message. No envelope. Just typed and magnet pinned to the metal mailbox. You've been warned. Final notice. Comply or escalate. This wasn't HOA policy anymore. This felt like pressure. It felt like scouting. It felt like war. Elaine didn't panic. She stretched her back, cracked her neck, and poured black coffee into a steel mug. Then she walked each dog to the garden field, one at a time. Back on grid, she said quietly. Brutus blinked twice. Echo didn't move. Delta sat still, waiting. They knew what it meant. They were no longer in peace mode. Now, they were on post again. They showed up with bolt cutters, clipboards, and a plan, but they forgot one thing. These dogs weren't pets. They were trained, and they were waiting. It started like a routine violation check. 3 men in khakis and HOA badges wandered up the drive at 7:42 a.m. One wore a GoPro. Another clutched a stun baton. The last carried bolt cutters, as if Elaine's fence line was a criminal act. Elaine stood at the gate, hoodie on, arms crossed. Still, all 3 dogs were out of sight. The man with the clipboard cleared his throat. Ma'am, per Section 14C and 2 prior notices, we're here to conduct a non-compliance assessment. This is standard protocol for aggressive animal investigations. Elaine shifted only slightly. I didn't authorize anyone to enter this property, she said flatly. We don't need permission, Baton Guy snapped. Your presence has been deemed a safety concern. Brutus stepped into view. He didn't growl. He didn't charge. He just walked to Elaine's side and sat. Perfect posture, eyes locked on the badge in the man's hand. Clipboard guy hesitated, flipping frantically through his forms. You've already received multiple warnings, he muttered, and the board passed unanimous consent. Your dogs are defined as... They're military veterans, Elaine interrupted. They protected more lives than your entire committee combined. Then came the mistake. Bolt cutter guy moved toward the gate handle. Click. Echoes surfaced like a whisper from the garden bed. Silent, low, tense. Delta was already flanking near the side steps, completely still. And Brutus? Brutus stood. No bark, no snarl, just 5 steps forward. The air shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just a house anymore. It was a perimeter. Clipboard guy dropped his laminated copy of Procedures. Call them off, the Baton man demanded. They're not on, Elaine said coolly. Bolt cutter guy lunged for the latch. Delta moved first, like a missile made of muscle and memory. She didn't bite. She just slammed his knees backward like he'd been hit by a school bus. He crashed down hard, bolt cutter spinning into a rose bush. Baton man raised his arm. Echo was already there, close enough to see his pulse. One growl, not a bark, just a warning drenched in control. Brutus circled around him as if laying out zones of fire. Elaine raised her hand and snapped her fingers. All 3 dogs froze. Still, Unmoving, deadly calm. That's when Karen pulled up, SUV gleaming, phone already recording. Her voice lashed through the morning heat. Get those animals under control. Elaine didn't even look at her. They are... Karen pointed. This is an act of aggression. You'll regret this. Elaine stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. Already regretted ever moving here. So now, her voice dropped. We're even. It wasn't about the barking. It was never about the dogs. The truth was buried under paperwork. And once they found it, the entire neighborhood's perception shifted. By the time the HOA limped off her property, defeated and humiliated, Elaine knew the fight wasn't over. No petty committee sent armed escorts over a noise complaint. This was bigger. Much bigger. Trixie was the one who found the first thread. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was Elaine's cousin and a tech junkie. Paranoid in the most useful ways. She stayed up the entire night digging through public records, zoning changes, and property development applications. And at 2:17 a.m., something snapped into place. Elaine was sitting on land the HOA desperately wanted to develop. They filed a civil zoning shift 2 months ago, Trixie said, spinning her laptop around. Right through your south lot. It's their only route to the expansion tract. Elaine studied the document. Karen's signature. A proposed access road. Lines scrawled in red. Lines straight through her garden, goat pen, and back fence. But there was more. 12 days before the first violation, Karen filed an environmental exemption claim. Trixie added, only homeowners without aggressive animals can qualify. It would have fast-tracked construction. Elaine's silence was cold, calculating. They weren't afraid of her dogs. They were afraid of what her dogs protected. Her property was the obstacle. The dogs were the excuse. And the harassment, well, that was the first punch in a playbook built on power, pressure, and forcing people to break just enough to give up what really mattered. This wasn't personal. It was procedural sabotage disguised as safety. They wanted access. She was in the way. But Karen made one mistake. She came after a woman trained not to break. They didn't bring lawyers. They brought uniforms. For officers, a white van, and a simple order signed in ink and entitlement. Remove the dogs. But they forgot who trained them and who stood behind them. The next time trouble came, it wasn't clipboards and fake badges. It was 2 sheriff cruisers, a white unmarked van, and 4 armed officers walking up Elaine's driveway like they already owned the place. Brutus was pacing by the porch. Quiet, ears low, waiting. Elaine was in the barn, feeding the chickens when the boots hit gravel. Ma'am, one of them shouted, set the bucket down, and put your hands where you can see them. She turned slowly. No panic. Eyes calm. Hands loose by her side. What's this about? She asked. You're being taken into custody under Civil Code 14C, he replied. Endangerment, obstruction of enforcement, and failure to comply with animal regulations. Elaine raised an eyebrow. For dogs that didn't attack anyone? The officer didn't answer, just stepped forward. Behind him, the van doors opened, and 2 men in animal control vests stepped out, holding leashes. Delta stepped into the open first, stared down the van like it was a predator. Brutus moved next, positioning himself between Elaine and the officers. Echo didn't move. She just watched, tense as a coiled spring. One of the officers leaned toward the van team. Those the dogs. Yeah, one muttered. Orders say we confiscate for federal evaluation. Brutus took a slow step forward, eyes never leaving the man's hand. That's close enough, Elaine commanded quietly. He stopped, still, but trembling just slightly. Then Karen arrived. Like always, perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, big smug smile. All of this, she said dramatically, could have been avoided if you just followed the rules. Elaine didn't even look at her. You don't want these dogs, she whispered. Karen snorted. They're evidence. No, Elaine said. They're protection. At her signal, Brutus turned, walked straight into the crate, and sat. Echo followed. She didn't resist, didn't whine. Delta was last, eyes locked on Elaine, confused but trusting. One by one, They were loaded up and driven away. Karen watched the van disappear, then looked smugly toward Elaine. You should have just listened. Elaine looked back. Cold, focused, dangerous. No, she said. You should have just stayed scared. Elaine didn't fight with fists. She fought with silence, evidence, and the kind of strength that waits patiently in the shadows until it's time to strike. Elaine came home 42 hours later. No charges, no apology, just a ride back in a cruiser, and a paper trail no one wanted to answer questions about. She stepped out, didn't say anything, didn't need to. Her boots hit the dirt like punctuation marks. Trixie was waiting on the porch with a hard drive, a folder of HOA violations, and a smirk that meant someone was going to burn. The zoning scam got it all, she said. Emails. Transfers. Karen signed off on it. DEA's looking at the backlot chemical report now. Elaine just nodded. She walked to the porch where 3 empty bowls still sat, 3 crates, 3 untouched leashes hanging like ghosts. She reached for Brutus's leash, paused, then slowly lowered her hand. Not yet, her eyes seemed to say. An hour later, the gate opened. The white van returned, this time with a federal escort. And her dogs? Brutus came first. Tail lifted, head proud. Echo followed, quiet, alert, no hesitation. Then Delta, who sprinted like she'd never left, straight into Elaine's arms. The officer handed over paperwork. All 3 cleared. 0 aggression. They're yours. Officially. Karen? She was arrested 2 days later. For fraud, perjury, misappropriation of board funds, and obstruction of federal investigation. Turns out, you can only bear the truth for so long before it grows roots. And this time, it uprooted everything. The HOA was dissolved. The land? Protected. Elaine's name was cleared. And her home? Peaceful again. But not silent. Because every morning at sunrise, you can hear the soft jingle of 3 tags. Still trained. Still loyal. Still waiting. They thought she was alone. Quiet. Simple. Powerless. But quiet doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean surrender. In the end, it wasn't the dogs that scared the neighborhood. It was the discipline, the unity, the way 3 animals could move as one, without chaos, without rage, just calm, controlled presence that said, "We're watching." Karen tried to weaponize fear, but Elaine weaponized truth. She didn't shout. She didn't post rants online. She didn't play the HOA's game. She just watched, collected, waited, and when the moment came, she moved like someone who'd been trained not just to survive a war, but to end one. Her victory wasn't loud. It came in paper trails, legal reversals, and the sound of a van door opening. And the dogs? They returned not as threats, but as heroes. Heroes who never once bit, barked, or broke formation, even when the system targeted them for simply existing. It makes you ask, what does fear really look like in a neighborhood? Is it the sound of barking at midnight? Or is it how we treat those we don't understand? Because this story wasn't about dogs, or even the HOA. It was about possession, power, and the mistake of thinking silence means surrender. There's a certain peace you find on the other side of a fight you never wanted, but wouldn't walk away from. Elaine found it. And now, so have Brutus, Echo, and Delta. If you ever drive past that property, you'll see a sign nailed quietly to the oak post at the end of the driveway. We don't start wars here, but we finish them. And hanging just beneath it, 3 tags, gently swaying in the breeze. Justice, it turns out, sound a lot like silence, from those who no longer need to prove a thing. If this story moved you, or made you think twice about what real strength looks like, go ahead and hit that like button to support the channel. Got thoughts? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Seriously, I want to hear your stories too. And if you want more true tales of justice, loyalty, and ordinary people standing up to extraordinary challenges, subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes a story like this is more than just a story. Thanks for watching. Stay strong, stay aware, and stay loyal.